You're on the verge of getting a new PocketBook Color e-reader and aren't sure about which one? Or you already have an InkPad Color 2 and are thinking about upgrading to one of the newer models? Then this video is for you, as we're doing a quick comparison between the three. Let's jump right in and start with the build quality. The InkPad Color 2 and 3 don't just look similar, they are essentially identical when it comes to their form and size. Just the colors of the frames are different. So both have recessed 7.8-inch screens, meaning that the front isn't flush. That's one of the differences to the Era Color. That one has a smaller 7-inch screen and the front is flush, which is a first for a PocketBook Color e-reader. I'd say the recessed screens have a very slight advantage when it comes to clarity, but that difference is so small that you have to look for it, and it's typically not noticeable when using the devices normally. So that's something I wouldn't lose any sleep over. But I'll come to the screens in a second. Specs-wise, the three e-readers have the same chipset, so no differences here. The InkPad Color 2 was actually the first PocketBook e-reader with the new quad-core CPU, which was definitely a step in the right direction because Kaleido color screens seem to need a bit more performance than typical black and white screens. So the first PocketBook InkPad Color was much slower than these three. All three of them have 1 gig of RAM, so opening large PDF files or comics isn't an issue. Because all three have IPX8 water protection, none of them has a microSD card expansion slot. Those are mutually exclusive in this setup because the water protection is implemented with a coating of the electronics instead of making the device waterproof. With 32 gigs of internal storage, all three have enough space for most people to not think too much about having to free up storage too often. But it really depends on how the e-readers are being used. Comics and audiobooks take up much more space, so exclusively using those will lead to filling up the internal storage quicker. There's also a built-in speaker on all three e-readers, so you can listen to audiobooks, music, and the text-to-speech function without having to use external speakers or headphones via Bluetooth. One difference between the three devices is obviously the form factor and also the buttons. So the Era Color has what we typically call an asymmetrical shape, where the grip area is on the side of the screen instead of the bottom. The Kindle Oasis wasn't the first e-reader to feature that form factor, but it was definitely the one that made it popular. And I also love it on the Era Color, especially because of that angled part right here that makes it fit so perfectly in my palm. I'd say the Era Color is generally nicer to handle than the InkPad Color e-readers, and the asymmetrical design is one of those reasons. The other one is the lighter weight. With 235 grams, the Era Color is easier to hold for longer periods compared to the roughly 270 grams of the other two. However, what's better on the InkPad line are the page turn buttons. Both of them are individually curved, so you can easily find and differentiate them with your fingers without looking, even though they essentially feature a gapless design. On the Era Color, the page turn buttons are also curved, but that curve goes over both buttons, so it's harder to distinguish them. And last but not least, build quality is very good on all of them, with the high quality plastic frame around the device looking almost like aluminum, but I'm still not a fan of the material used on the back side of the devices because it feels a bit cheaper than the rest. But all of them have this ribbed build, which helps in getting a secure grip. And for all three of them, there are optionally available covers that you can attach to the back side of the device, which is a cool way of protecting the screen and adding a bit of a book-like feeling without adding much bulk. Okay, let's talk about the displays. The PocketBook InkPad Color 3 and the Era Color are both using the same Kaleido 3 technology. That means they have a 300 ppi black and white resolution and a 150 ppi color resolution. The PocketBook InkPad Color 2, on the other hand, uses the previous generation, which is called Kaleido Plus. It works on the exact same principle with having a color filter on top of the ink screen, but there the color filter only has a resolution of 100 ppi. That difference doesn't sound huge when just looking at the numbers, but what also changed with the newer Kaleido 3 screens is the subpixel matrix. It's not just higher in resolution, but the RGB pixels are arranged differently now. This all leads to the screens looking a bit different, even to the naked eye. The InkPad Color 2 screen has this more textured, grainier look to it, and I notice a bit more shimmering when turning up the front light. That effect is really hard to capture on camera, but looking at it closely, you can see the different subpixel setups. Even though this is not the biggest difference in the world, personally I think it makes the InkPad Color 3 and the Era Color more comfortable to use, and I always recommend Kaleido 3 over all the Kaleido screens every time. But there might be other considerations as well, like using the screen without a front LED, which is something I typically don't recommend with any Kaleido screen generation. But if you simply don't want to use a front LED, the InkPad Color 2 screen is a bit better for that. Because of the different subpixel matrix and the larger gaps between the colored pixels, the screen's background is a bit lighter compared to the other two. It also doesn't have that slight greenish tint that the InkPad Color 3 has. So that's something that's actually a bit better on the InkPad Color 2. In terms of color addition, there are only very slight differences. The two InkPad Color e-readers are mostly the same, with slight advantages for the InkPad Color 3. The Era Color is slightly less saturated in direct comparison, but color fidelity for blue is a bit better on that one. The default color settings on all three devices isn't the best in my opinion. I mentioned this in my reviews for the InkPad Color 3 and the Era Color already, but recommended jumping into the settings and make some slight adjustments as shown here. That's much better if you ask me. And last but not least, let's also quickly check out the front lights. All three can be adjusted in color temperature, so you can use them to comfortably read at night with a warm color setting. The two InkPad Color models are again very similar when it comes to the evenness, and there is only a slight brightness gradient but nothing to worry about. The InkPad Color 2 has a generally warmer front light and can also get a bit brighter than the InkPad Color 3. Again, not a huge difference, but the InkPad Color 2 has a slight advantage here. The PocketBook Era Color screen is lit from the side, which typically creates a more noticeable gradient. The Era Color is no exception here. The front light isn't bad, but there is a slightly brighter strip of light at the edge of the screen that's much less pronounced on the other two. Not counting that part, the light is distributed very evenly across the screen. But bottom line is, if you're sensitive to irregularities of the front light, the InkPad Color 2 and Color 3 are better in that aspect. Because all three devices use the same exact software, I won't be comparing that. Please check out my other reviews if you want to learn more about that. Which brings us to the conclusion of this comparison. To make a long story short, out of those three, even though it's the most expensive one, I still think the PocketBook InkPad Color 3 offers the best value for money right now. It has the best combination of color saturation, front light quality, and screen resolution. The Era Color is a solid choice if you want something more compact. The 7-inch asymmetrical form factor with the lower weight definitely has its benefits that can still make it a better pick depending on what you need. The InkPad Color 2 is actually still a solid color ink e-reader, but because of the older Kaleido Plus generation, I wouldn't recommend getting it over the other two. But if you already have one, I would only upgrade to one of the others if the screen texture really bothers you. In terms of colors, the InkPad Color 2 is still on par with Kaleido 3. That's it. Like and subscribe if you found this comparison helpful and to not miss future reviews and comparisons. Thanks for your time watching and see you in the next one.